Boker Tov and Chanukah Sameach. That today's Daf Yomi is Nedarim Daf Nun Hey Nedarim 55. So today's Daf Yomi, we start with the mission on the top of Nun Hey Amid Aleph. Hanodar min hadagan. If the person takes a vow against dagan, the dagan typically means grain, but in this context, we're going to see from the Mishnah, it means something else. So we say here in the Mishnah, you're prohibited to have pol hamitri, these Egyptian beans, when they're dried out. When they're dried out, you're not eating the leaves anymore, you're eating the berries, as we've seen before. That's the position of Rebbe Meir. And even though the pol hamitri is not one of the five grains, nevertheless, since by Nedarim we follow the way people speak, and Meir's in the position that since people, when they say dagan, they mean anything that grows from the ground that you pile up. So that's going to be considered within the definition of dagan. And so therefore, pol hamitri is included. That's the position of Rebbe Meir. We're only including within dagan the five grains, which is typically understood to be wheat, barley, spelt, oat, and rye. Rebbe Meir Omer Anoder min hatvua. That if you make a vow against tivua, then you're prohibiting the five grains. But if you make a vow against dagan, asar bikol, then. But if you make a vow against dagan, you're going to say that. Then we're going to say that you're prohibited in anything that you pile up. So Meir is saying, even though I argue with you about what Lashon B'nai Adam is, how people speak with respect to dagan, but I admit to you that if you say Hanoder min hatvua, then you're going to be prohibited just in the five grains. But if you make a noder from dagan, then we're going to say that you're prohibited, that you're allowed to say, that you're going to be allowed to have anything that you pile up, with the exception of the five grains. But you're going to be allowed to have the fruits of the tree and the greens, because those you don't make a pile from them. So the Gemara says the Meimra. So we see from here that according to Rebbe Meir, that if somebody makes a vow against grain, he's prohibited anything that's piled up. We see from here that dagan means called the midgan mashma, that the word dagan means anything that you make a digun, anything that you make a pile, or a smooth pile. So Masif Rav Yosef challenges this, because it says in the verse in Divrei Yamim, after Chizkiyahu HaMelech took power and he strengthened everybody to start giving trumos and ma'asos to the Kohanim and Leviim, it says b'frotz hadavar, when the matter spread, Hirbu b'nei Yisrael, Reishis Dagan Tirosh V'Yitzar B'chol Tvuas HaSadeh, Ma'aser HaKol HaRov, that after the matter spread, that then they began to give the truma of the Dagan Tirosh V'Yitzar and all the crops of the field. So from the verse, it implies that at first they brought the Ma'aser Dagan, and then afterwards they brought all the crops of the field. So we see from here, from this pasuk, it seems to be that there are those that are crops of the field that are not included in the dagan. And so therefore the pasuk tells us they brought meiser from all the crops of the field. The amr is called the midgan mashma. And if you're going to say that when it says dagan, it means anything that's piled up, what does it mean when it says in the pasuk, kifrotz hadavar hirbu, when the matter spread, they increased this to imply that not only were they bringing trumos and ma'asos from the dagan, but from all the crops of the field. But shouldn't the crops of the field be included within dagan? So Rabbi, no, when it says the tuas hasadeh, it doesn't mean when it says the dagan that when it says the tuas hasadeh, it includes even those things that are not piled up. Suyei peros ha'ilon v'yarak, it includes the fruit and the grains. Then the Gemara tells us, the Meir says, I know there min hatvua, that the Mishnah said, from Meir says, if you take a vow against the tvua, then you're only prohibiting the chameshes haminin, the five grains. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Akomo din beno muder min hatvua she'eno aser al min chameshes haminin. Everybody, and here we're saying, even Rabbi Meir is saying that if you make a vow against the five grains, you're only including that if you make a vow against tvua, you're only including the 5 grains. Tanya nami achi shavim benodim and tvua shein aser el meheminin. They both agree that if you make a vow against tvua, that you're only prohibiting the chameshes minim. So the Gemara says pshita. It's obvious that tvua implies only the chameshes minim. So what's the brisa adding? So the Gemara explains. You might have thought that tvua implies anything that a person brings into his house. It's called tvua because the word tvua means alalta, and alalta is something that is praiseworthy and something that you bring into your home. And so therefore, you might have thought if you make a vow against tvua, you're including anything that you harvest. Therefore, kamash malan. So it's teaching us this. No, the lo mashma kol milui, that if you make a vow against tvua, it doesn't imply everything. So Masav Rav Yosef, what about Rav Yosef challenges this? That the Bnei Yisrael began to include, and they included in it everything. They included the peros and the yerek. So Amarava tvua l'chod, tvua sada l'chod. So in the first verse, it says tvua sada. That includes everything, but tvua only includes the chameshes minim. So Bar Mar Shmuel. So the Gemara tells us that the son of Mar Shmuel Pakid, he made a tzava, he made a will. The Wisnun Tleiser al Fezuzo Rava min alalta dinahar panya. He made a will that they should give 13,000 zuz to Rava from the alalta. We've been discussing this word alalta. We had said alalta means anything that's produced, any product. So to give from the alalta of Nahar Panya. So that he said, I'm giving that as my will to Rava. So Sholcha Rava V'kamid Rav Yosef. So Rava sent a message to his Rebbe Rav Yosef. Alalta Eichem Mikreya. What is this alalta? I'm Rav Yosef Masnisin he. Mishavim benodim minatvua shein asher elam michamesh esminin. So he said we have a Raisa, that it says that they both agree that if you make a vow against the tvua, it's from our Mishnah that if you make a vow, or the Raisa, if you make a vow against the tvua, then you're prohibited only in the chameshes aminin. So we see that the alalta means that tvua is alalta, and tvua, and the alalta therefore is the 5 grains. So Amoy Abaye says to his Rabbi Yosef, Midami. It's not the same. Tvua means the 5 species, but alalta is, even though it's a translation of tvua, it doesn't have the same implication. Alalta kol milui mashma. Alalta implies everything that you produce, everything that you gain. So it's not. So when we say that you're getting from the alalta of Nahar Panya, it's not. It's from all the prophets of Nahar Panya, not just from the grains of Nahar Panya. So the Gemara says. Jula kami de Rava, so they return the matter to Rava. Amar halo kami bayale. So he says, don't ask me that question. Dalalta kol milei mashma. For sure, alalta implies. Rava says, I knew that. Of course, I know that already. You don't have to tell me that. Of course, alalta implies everything. Hadu di bayale. This is what I was asking. I know alalta means all the things that are produced, but I was asking the following: Schar batim schar sfinos mai. Was Rava getting from Mar Shmuel, from the son of Mar Shmuel? Was he getting, or am I also getting the rent from the houses and the ships? Mi amrinon kivan de pachton la'avalaltahi. Do I say that since these ships and these houses deteriorate, it's not considered alalta? Odilma kivan du yadia pachatayo alaltahi. Or maybe we say that since the depreciation is not immediately recognizable, meaning to say you only recognize the depreciation after many years, and not only that, you get a rent every year, maybe we're going to say it's also considered part of the alalta. So that was my question. Of course, I know that the alalta refers to crops and not just the 5 grains. So this is how Rava responded to his Rebbe and to Abaye. So Amru Rabbanan Kamei de Rav Yosef. So the rabbis said that they reported Rava's words that obviously alalta implies everything back to Rav Yosef, his Rebbe. So the Rebbe responds, Amar v'chi me'achar delo tzarachan amay shalchan. So he says, well, if they don't need us, why is he asking us a question? Sometimes the person asks the Rebbe a question. The Rebbe answer goes, right, I know that. I want to ask something else. No, that's disrespectful. That's what Rabbi Yosef is saying. If you ask the Rebbe a question, you're supposed to sit there and take in the answer and say thank you, not say, right, I know that already. I'm asking something else. So that's what Rabbi Yosef said. Why is he asking us this question? Ikbid Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef was upset with Rava. So Shama Rava did, of course, Rava's a huge tzaddik. He wouldn't want to make his Rebbe upset. Shama Rava. So Rava heard this. He came before him on Erev Yom Kippur in order to be Mephias his Rebbe, to appease his Rebbe. He found that Rav Yosef's attendant was pouring wine for Rav Yosef. Now remember, Rav Yosef was blind. So Rabbi says, give me the wine so I can pour it for Rav Yosef. So so he gave it to Rava, and so Rava was pouring him a cup of wine. When Rav Yosef drank the wine, he says, I taste this wine and it tastes like Rava's wine, because we know in the Gemara on Shabbos that Rava had the custom to pour specifically that there were not less than 3 portions of wine. So Rava had a specific way of pouring the wine, and Rav Yosef was able to taste it. Amar, so Rava responds, who knew? Yeah, that's because that's me. I'm Rava. So the Gemara says, Amar, so Rav Yosef says to Rava, don't sit down. I want you to explain something to me. So Rav Yosef is giving him musar here. He's rebuking him, but he was teaching him at the same time. He says, what do we do with the pasuk that it says in Bamidbar? It says that when the Jewish people were traveling, that they dug wells, and what is it? And then they traveled. And where did they go? They went from Midbar Matana, Nachliel, Bamos. And so what do we do with this? What do we do with this pasuk? These, now, literally speaking, these were the names of places that the Jewish people stopped on their journey. So Rava said to Rav Yosef, keep it. So Rava obviously knew where Rav Yosef was going. So he says, this is what we do with the pasuk. If a person makes himself like a wilderness, like a desert, like a wilderness, that he's mufkar, that he's onerous to everybody. Torah nisna matana. Then the Torah is given to him as a gift. Shenemar midbar matana, from the wilderness to matana. That in order to get to Torah, you need to make yourself hefker. You need to make yourself onerous. You need to have humility. Once the Torah is given to you as a gift, the person is called the inheritance of Hashem. As it states to Matana Nachliel, but Kivan Shenachlo El, and once you get the Torah as an inheritance, then you rise up to greatness, as it states to Minachliel Bamos. And furthermore, in Migbia Atzmo, if a person, however, Chas v'Shalom, acts with arrogance, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashpil, God will lower him down, as it states, Mibamot Hagai, from the heights will go down to the valley. Well, not only that, Shokin also the Karaka. But we immerse you in the ground, as it says, v'nishkafa pnei yeshimun. As it states in the rest of the pasuk, v'nishkafa, you will be immersed on pnei yeshimun. V'im chozer, but if you repent, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Magbio, God will raise you up again, as it states on the top of Nedarim Abayz. Kol gei yinaseh. Everyone who is lower down, God can raise up. Tanya. So the Gemara says in the Braisa, no Dagan, also before Mitzri Yavish. If a person takes a vow against Dagan, then they're going to be prohibited in this dried out pool on Mitzri, dried out Egyptian bean, Mutter Balach. You're allowed to have the fresh one, because the fresh one are the greens we've already been discussing the last couple of days. And that's not the same thing as things that are piled up, the berries. Mutter Balach, but you're allowed, Mutter Ba'oraz. If you take a vow against the Dagan, you're allowed to have rice, because people don't pile up the rice. They don't make smooth piles. And bechilka. What's chilka? Chilka is the wheat that they split into 2, into targus, that they wheat split into 3, uvatisni, wheat that they split into 4. So it says, the Gemara brings the law of another law. I know them in Peros Hashanah. If a person takes a vow against all the Peros of the year, all the produce of this year, Asr b'chol Peros Hashanah, you're prohibited in all the fruits of that year. Mutar b'gediyim, but you're allowed to have the goats, the tlaim, and the sheep, ubachalav, and the milk, and beitzim, and the gozos. Excuse me, and the eggs and the baby birds, because that's not called peros. Those are not called the produce, even though they're produced that year. But if you say anything that grows this year, asr b'kul, you're prohibited in all of them. I know them in peros haaretz. If the person takes a vow not to benefit from the fruits of the land, asr b'kul peros haaretz, and the person is prohibited in all the fruits of the land, whether they're fruits of the land or whether they are fruits of a tree. Mutter b'kmein b'pitrios, but you're allowed to have mushrooms and truffles because that's not going to be considered peros haaretz. They don't grow from the ground. V'im amar gidui karko, but if we say anything that grows from the ground is upon me, then the kmein and pitrios didn't grow from the earth; they grow from the floor, but not from the earth. And if you say that anything that grows from the ground, then you're prohibited asr b'kul, and that includes also mushrooms and truffles. Viramini, Mar explains in the Brisa, right? I can prove to you. You know, we were in, we went up a Mount Etna. There was no earth there. They were growing the mushrooms, which was growing on the volcano ash. So that's proof. It doesn't grow from the earth. It grows from the floor, but not from the earth. So how can we say that petrios are included with anything that grows from the ground, but don't we say that the bracha on something that does not grow from the ground is a shahakol? Mitanya al melech, on salt, val zamis, on salt water, val kmein and pitrios, and kmein and pitrios, mushrooms, which don't go from the ground, al omar shahakol ni'abed varo. You say shahakol. So this proves that mushrooms don't grow from the ground because you're making a blessing of shahakol on it. Amar Abaye mirba rabu me'arba. Meinok me'avira yanki v'lo me'ara. So Abaye says to grow the mushrooms, they grow from the ground, from the moisture of the earth, and so therefore it's considered within kidui karka. But to nourish them, their main nourishment is meinok me'avira yanki v'lo me'ara. They're nourished. They grow from the ground, but they're nourished from the air. And so therefore you don't say Bora Priyadama, but Shahakol. Valkatani, Mara says, but it says in the Mishnah, Brachos al Davar She'en Giduim in Haaretz. That's something that doesn't grow from the ground. And we see from here that the mushrooms don't grow from the ground. No, the Mara says Tani al Davar She'en Yonik min Haaretz. It means something that's not nourished from the ground. Okay. I know there minaksus, somebody who takes a vow not to benefit from kisus. Kisus are clothing. Mutter b'sak, then you're allowed to wear a sock. This is like a garment that they make out of goat hair. Ubiyariya is a very thick garment that's basically that's not sewn together. Ubachamila, this is a thicker garment that you use to cover your head in the rain, in the head of the rain. These garments, their thickness, people don't usually wear them, and so therefore they're not considered really a garment. It's not called a kasus. Kasus refers to something that you typically would wear. But Amar Konim Semer Ola Alai. But let's say you say, I take a vow that I'm not going to wear any wool on me. Mutar Liskasos Begizit Semer. You're allowed to wear sheared wool because you really, when you prohibit wool, it wasn't reference to sheared wool, but it was something that typically the people wear as a garment, and not the wool that's just sheared from the sheep directly. Hapishtan oli. Let's say a vow that you're not going to wear pishtan. Pishtan is usually translated as flax. Mutar kasos banitze pishtan. You're allowed to wear this flax after it's beaten, but before it's spun, meaning it's combed, and you're getting ready to spin it. So, because typically speaking, when you take a vow against Pishtan, they think you mean a flax garment. But Yehuda Omer Akofi, I know there. It all depends upon the context in which you say it. Meaning to say, if you say Ola Olai, then it's your intent to prohibit a garment. But let's say Tan, but let's say you're carrying it, Vizia, and you're sweating, while you're Rechel Kasha, and you're smelling because you're carrying this there's wool or there's flax, and Amar Konim Tzemer Pishtim Olai, and you say, listen, I'm not going to eat wool or linen, Mutter Laskasos, then you're allowed to wear it, but also but you're not allowed to throw it over your back, because there the intent was to carry it and not to wear it. That was the vow. Tanya, no derminaksus, if you take a vow against a garment, mutter besak ubirio v'chamila. If you take a vow against clothing, then you're going to be allowed to eat. If you take a vow against clothing, you're going to be allowed to wear sak ubirio chamila. These are fabrics, but they're not clothing, so to speak, or they're some things that you sometimes wrap around your body, but they're not clothing. Also, but if you take a vow against kisus, you're going to be prohibited in a punda. What's punda is a type of belt that like a money belt. Uba piskaya, this is a wider belt. Uba kurstia, the Gemara is going to explain that. Katablia, this is a type of garment that you make from very thick leather that you wear, that you make from very thick leather. Vampalia is shoes. Pulinya is a type of sash, and shoes. Vikova and a hat. All these things are going to be considered under the rubric of a ksus. My escorti, what is this escorti? Which we said if you take a vow against ksus, it includes escorti. Amar kituna detzala. It's a leather shirt that the leather makers wear over their garments. So the Gemara says, Tanya, so the Gemara said that if you take a vow against the ksus, you're going to be allowed to wear these sak and hiria, these things that you typically wear, but they're not going to be considered a garment. But the problem is, with respect to the Hilchos Shabbos, if you wear something on Shabbos that's a burden, then you're in violation of carrying on Shabbos if there's no Erev. Clothing you're allowed to wear, but burdens you're not allowed to wear. So what do these categories fit into? Tanya Yotzim B'Sak Ava, that on Shabbos you're allowed to go out with a very thick sack. Uvis, it's not going to be considered a burden. Uvisagos Ava, and a sagos, a thick sagos, which is similar to a sack. You're allowed to go out with them if it's raining, and these are like garments, not garments, but like fabrics you put over your body to protect yourself from the rain. But you can't go out on Shabbos with a box over your head to protect you from the rain. And now with a net or a mattress they usually sleep on, because people don't wear them. So therefore, these objects are not called garments. It's considered a burden. You're not allowed to go out with Shabbos. Haro and Yotzim Misakin. The shepherds could go out with sacks in order to protect themselves from the rain. But now, once the shepherds do it, not only can the shepherds do it, everybody could do it. The Chachamim gave a real life example, which is that the shepherds do it. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rabbi Yehuda says we learn out everything from the context. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Keitzad Amar. Rabbi Yehuda Kolafi Anoder. What does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he says everything goes according to the vow? If a person was wearing woolen garment, and it was causing him distress, and the person says, I take a vow that wool will not come upon me. He's not allowed to wear it, but he's allowed to carry it. But let's say he was carrying it. Pishtan, he was carrying this flax, and he's sweating, and he says, Konam Pishtan Olala, and he says, oh, I don't want to, and then he makes his vow against Pishtan, Mutter Wilvosh then he's allowed to wear it, but he's prohibited to carry it. Okay, want to say one thing, hold on.